People don't realize how much goes into teaching. It's not just the subject that you're teaching and the thing that you are specialized in. A lot of your child comes into our classroom and we have to address all of that, even though our job title says that we're just teaching English.
We are capable of informing the policies around our practice. We are really engaged with our communities. We're really engaged with our school systems. We're highly knowledgeable about what reform means and what it means to transform our profession for the better.
It was always teachers who gave me a sense of hope and purpose. And so my whole career has really been about trying to do for other kids what my teachers did for me. We have to find a way, a bipartisan way, back to the idea of some basic notion of transparency and accountability.
If we're going to do high quality, good public policy making that lasts and gets results, it's going to have to be bipartisan.
Seeing how many bright and caring and passionate people are already in DC or across the country having conversations with policymakers, that's something I didn't know.
I have been so enriched with ideas and with really practical things that I can do as a teacher because I've talked to middle school math teachers, I've talked to high school social studies teachers, and because of that, my ability to be creative as a first grade teacher is increased in just a few days.
I would like to see that for us to adopt a strategic staffing model. We have a lot of really unique, diverse talent in our schools already, and I think that if we utilize those professionals and we allow people to continue to develop their practice while still actively teaching, I think that we could see a really remarkable shift in the results that we're begging for.
If we have these teacher leadership models where they can be coaches or mentors, I really feel that they would feel valued, and also it would expand their capacity.
I would want people to want to become teachers, and I would want people to see that as a career choice that was going to give them longevity in a field.
Are they making enough money to pay the rent or a mortgage in the area where they teach? Are they able to retire successfully? Are they able to properly raise their family and continue to teach? Teachers want to be in the classroom and we want to be doing a good job. Can we have the work-life balance that allows us to stay in the classroom for a long time?
When teachers thrive, students thrive.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. We're convening at a moment when the national conversation about the teaching profession feels both urgent and uncertain. Much of what we hear points to strain, challenge, and at times decline. And yet, when we look more closely at the data, a more precise story begins to emerge. A story of commitment as well as of systems that have not kept pace with the people within them. This is not just an education issue, it's a workforce issue of national consequence. Today's conversation builds on two important new sources, a national data from Gallup and the Walton Family Foundation, and the broader work of BPC's Commission on the American Workforce, both of which point to a common conclusion. The challenge before us is not a lack of talent or commitment, but systems that are not designed for the realities of today's workforce. Too often, the systems meant to support educators and workers feel disconnected, confusing, and out of step with the realities of modern work and family life. At the same time, the pace of change, driven by technology and AI, is accelerating, raising the stakes for getting this right. Consider what the data already tells us. 1 in 5 teachers say they are finding it difficult to get by on their household income. 1 in 3 holds a second job unrelated to education, and 85% of them work that second job during the school year, not just over the summer. These are all signals, or not signals of withdrawal, but they are signals of a systems problem. So our purpose today is not to revisit what is well understood, but to bring clarity to what we're learning and what that learning requires of all of us. So over the course of the next hour, we'll do three things. We'll begin with the new national data from Gallup and the Walton Family Foundation. We'll step back to interpret what that data suggests about the future of work and the design of the profession. And third, we'll examine how these ideas are beginning to take shape in practice. So let's begin. It's my pleasure to introduce Stephanie Markin from Gallup, who will walk us through key findings from the Staying Power Report, a national survey of more than 2,000 K-12 teachers. Stephanie, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thanks so much to the entire BPC team for allowing me to join in this conversation. I'm going to start us off, as Cheryl mentioned, by sharing just a few key findings from the research that we just recently released in partnership with the Walton Family Foundation and BPC teams. And this work is really a culmination and just one single study that we've released in a series of different projects that we've been partnering with the foundation in over the course of the last few years. I'm going to start us off with just a few of those key findings, all of which are available publicly online, so I would encourage you to download and read that report. Among the most important findings that we released in this research is this. We find that, unfortunately, too many teachers, as Cheryl mentioned, are really struggling to get by in their when it comes to their income. This research is based on 2,000 interviews that we conducted quantitatively with teachers nationally. In it, we asked which one of these phrases comes closest to your own feelings about your household income. 21% said they were finding it difficult to get by on present income. We had a large percentage, 52%, said that they were just getting by, and only 28% reported that they were living comfortably on their present income. Now, what do we know? Well, we know that when teachers are struggling financially, that they turn to other jobs and gigs that end up being competing responsibilities for their times. So when we asked individuals, in addition to your primary classroom teaching role, have you taken on additional jobs, responsibilities, or gigs for pay that are related to your teaching job, or maybe in some cases not related? We found a large percentage were doing at least one, if not more than one of these secondary jobs or gigs to help them address that financial pressure that they reported. And 33% of all teachers report that they were teaching or performing a secondary job that was unrelated to their teaching profession. And we had 62% of teachers reporting a secondary job or gig or responsibility that was related to teaching. As Cheryl mentioned, so many of these teachers reported that they were doing this during the school year. So it's not to say that they're 10-month employees who are spending their summer months taking on these additional jobs or responsibilities. Very much often the case, the majority reported that they were doing this during the school year. When money is tight, unfortunately, teachers are more likely to leave education for extra income. This is what we know to be true based on existing and data that was collected in this particular study. As I mentioned, 33% of the teachers for whom we surveyed reported that they were in that additional non-teaching related job, but that percentage was much higher among those individual teachers who were struggling financially to get by. Among those teachers who said it was difficult to get by on their present income, 46% of them reported that they were working in a job that was unrelated to education as a secondary gig or responsibility. 34% of those who said that they were just getting by reported that they were in that secondary job or gig. And 22% of those who were living comfortably were taking on that secondary job or responsibility. What we hear overwhelmingly from all of the teachers for whom we've surveyed, both in this study and other studies we've conducted in partnership with the foundation team, is that teachers are looking at their current job as a career pathway. They're really looking to remain in the profession long term as much as is possible. But they also see multiple pathways to growth as a necessity within that career pathway. When we asked individual teachers, when you think about career growth as an educator, which of the following is most important to you personally? 37% said yes, getting more pay and benefits is incredibly important to them personally when they think about their long-term growth. But the remaining respondents for whom we surveyed reported one or more additional areas in which they were really focused, including getting new skills, earning advanced credentials at 21%. We also heard moving to a role outside of the classroom was important to 18% of them. So across all of these different additional areas of potential growth, we see a lot of interest among teachers, especially those who are really seeing this as a long-term profession that they want to remain in. With that, I'll turn it over to Cheryl to start the remaining this afternoon. Thanks so much for having me.
Want me to turn my mute on, and I did it, and there you go. Thanks, Stephanie. Appreciate you walking us through that. So the data are pretty clear, and it's telling us what is sustainable, what is not, and what a differently designed profession might allow. And importantly, what we're seeing is not a failure of individuals, but again, this sort of failure of systems. I want to go ahead and just jump right in with our first panel. I'm so pleased to be joined by two leaders whose work has long engaged these questions at the highest level. We have Romy Drucker, who leads the education program at the Walton Family Foundation, and Margaret Spellings, the former U.S. Secretary of Education and now President and CEO of the BPC. Thank you both for doing this. I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to start with a series of questions for both of you, and I'll turn to Margaret to answer first. When you consider these findings, what feels most essential to understand about this moment, and where might the broader narrative be falling short? Margaret, do you want to start?
Well, thank you, Cheryl, and thanks to everybody who's on this program today who cares deeply about teaching and teachers. I know personally it was very inspiring to be, you saw the video at the kickoff of this. These people are amazing. They want to grow. They're hard workers. That shows up in the data too. And they want to contribute through their careers to the betterment of students. And I certainly was inspired by that and continue to be. You know, we also know that while AI and technology are changing everything, we also know for sure that nothing can replace the role of that human connection, that caring adult in a child's life. And while AI, we hope, will be an accelerant to learning, there's nothing that is going to substitute for a fantastic teacher. And so I think what this data shows us is that we have to put our money where our mouths are. We say we value teaching as a profession. It's time for us to demonstrate that we do. Yes, with pay and benefits, but also with systems and structures that really support the keeping of fantastic teachers in classrooms and their growth throughout their careers. So some amazing takeaways here. I'm thrilled that we were able to participate in this research, and I think it can provide us a roadmap of what we need to do to put our money where our mouths are.
Thanks, Margaret. Romy?
Thank you so much to everybody on the call. And I just want to say that Margaret and her team put their money where their mouths are. That video was actually shot at the BPC office, where teachers were invited to connect with one another, with national leaders, and really just be in conversation about the future of the profession. And I just want to elevate the importance of creating those spaces and anchoring on teacher voice and what it means to teachers when we do that as leaders in this sector. I love that video, but my one nitpick with it is that it says teachers are the heart of our education system. I just want to say that teachers are the heart of our communities, of our local economies, and in so many ways of our workforce. And I'm so heartened that the folks on this call are lifting up teachers as an important group as we talk about the future of the workforce in this country. As Margaret mentioned, we are in a moment of transition in terms of our economy, what jobs will look like, why learning matters, and teachers are going to play a critical role as guides for our students. So we just feel like this is the moment to be thinking differently about the design of the profession. I think the statistic that jumps out at me from the Gallup research is that 84% of teachers say that they want to be in this profession, but only 55% say they plan to remain a classroom teacher. This isn't a motivation problem, as you noted, Cheryl. This is a design problem, and I'm actually really optimistic because of that, because we can fix it. We can fix it. So thank you again for hosting this call with so many thinkers and leaders who are going to bring ideas to the table and making teachers part of that discussion.
Thanks, Romy, and thanks for highlighting that piece. So teachers are not withdrawing. They are adapting, and in doing so, they are pointing us toward maybe a different model of the profession. Again, some of the data, 87% of teachers with side jobs are choosing education-related work, tutoring, mentoring, curriculum design, roles that actually strengthen their teaching. Burnout is significantly lower when that work is aligned to teaching versus when it detracts from it, reinforcing that the issue, again, is not workload, but maybe alignment. Suggests a design signal for how the profession maybe could be structured differently. If we were designing this profession today within a modern workforce system, what would we do differently? Do you both have thoughts on that? Romy, do you want to start?
Sure. For us at the Walton Family Foundation, we've long supported teachers. But about 6 years ago, we kind of reframed the question, and it was really, really simple. How can we make teaching easier for teachers? How can we reduce the burden of teaching to be able to unlock teachers' natural gifts, their inspiration, their motivation to persist in the classroom? And what we've uncovered in our work, what the Gallup research affirms, what NCTQ and Teach Plus are working towards is a set of simple ideas. Teachers want to collaborate more. You heard that in the video. That needs to be a feature of how we think about this profession. Teachers want to be on teams with one another. Teachers want access to materials that help them do their jobs better, high quality instructional materials that make it easier for them to teach in all ways, to support interventions, to help them design lessons that are in equal parts engaging and rigorous. And in addition, they want ongoing support to grow in their roles. Like teachers want to feel like they're on a career path. In many other sectors, these are very simple features of what it means to be in a workforce. And I do feel like we are making progress on these fronts as a sector. So in some ways, I think what this research is asking us to do is double down and really respond to teachers' needs. AI is obviously introducing a new opportunity to support teachers with tools that I think can reduce the administrative burden on their time. So that's exciting, and maybe we'll come back to that later in the discussion. But I do think that we are on the cusp of change and have been pushing in the right direction.
Thanks, Romy. Do you have thoughts, Margaret, on sort of the
I think I would just echo all of that and say that we know that teachers, like all of us, want to grow and continue to grow in our careers. Of course they do, but they also want to stay in the classroom. And so when we saw on the slide that was presented, yes, you can go into administration or do other roles within education, but I think we and students are most benefited by when our best and brightest and most skilled teachers are working in classrooms in ways that they're growing professionally with respect to expertise, use of tools and materials, as Romy said, AI, making things simpler for them. But we need our best people doing that valuable work in classrooms and want to strengthen their teaching. And, we cannot overlook that the number one thing on there, and of course, yes, it's better when people stay in education and do that extra work in that context. But we have to look at pay and benefits. And, just today, the NEA is out with their state rankings. Interesting data therein, of course, where some states have made that a priority, but particularly in this world of dislocation and disruption, it can be a stable and secure and modern career and work setting for teachers. And we ought to look at and challenge state policymakers in our quest to return things to the states. Pay systems obviously have always been in state budgets and state government, local school boards, and so forth. But how do we think about compensation as we think about a career trajectory? How do we reward our best people and keep them in classrooms, but not have them have to sacrifice pay and growth financially to do that? We and our Commission on the American Workforce spoke to some of the issues around retirement for teachers. Social Security benefits and retirement security for those states who do not participate in Social Security. So it's a set of strategies, some of which start with the guts of teaching, materials, supports, longevity, but we can't ignore the meat and potatoes of pay and benefits also, and looking carefully at those pay systems and benefit systems as well.
Cheryl, can I jump in on this?
Yes,
Just
please.
1 second to offer up Arkansas as an example. Governor Sanders has truly prioritized, as part of the implementation of the LEARNS Act, strengthening the teacher workforce. She said, we want to be a state where teachers want to come to work. And so they raise starting teacher salaries and have the highest starting teacher salary in the nation. She said, we want to be a place that values teachers as they move forward in their lives and their careers. And they are one of 2 states, Arkansas, and the other state is Delaware, which have optimal paid leave policies for teachers. And so this is, as Margaret noted, about leadership on the part of our governors and our state education chiefs in setting a vision for education that includes the sort of teacher workforce in meaningful ways. And I just feel hopeful that more governors and state chiefs will read all of the reports coming out from NCTQ and BPC and Teach Plus and start kind of showing what they've got when it comes to taking this issue seriously.
I could just jump in because I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say, and this is a bipartisan issue. Romy just gave you one example of that, but this is not a place where we have political divide. Every state wants and needs and values fantastic teachers who can stay in the profession and be wildly successful. And it's resonant across the aisle, and that's why we at BPC have and will continue to embrace it.
Thank you both for that. And I do think, it's part of our remit after the Commission on the American Workforce and the release of the report is to really identify those, elevate and herald the states. We did this in the report, but we will continue to do that in its aftermath. And I think, both of those examples, Arkansas and Delaware, are certainly ones. And we have plans to do more related to the issue of paid leave in teachers. So thank you for raising that. You both mentioned AI, and I'd love to circle back to that at the end if we have a moment. But I want to get to this piece, which is the data highlights this sort of structural tension in career pathways. So 84% of teachers want to stay in instructional roles, but only 55% believe they can long term, and 44% see administration as the primary path to advancement, which suggests the system may be unintentionally pushing talent away from the classroom rather than creating the pathways within to grow within it. And if this is a sort of system design challenge, not a set of isolated problems, where would you begin, or do you have thoughts on where we might begin in redesigning that system itself? Margaret, do you have any?
Well, they also say they want to work together more and have that teacher, leader, coach environment. And what do you need to do that? Time. And so how do we think about organizing time in a way that allows that productive development to occur? And, right now we have pretty rigid, and sometimes they're not so rigorous, rigid structures around the school day, the school year, the number of minutes, and on and on and on. And we really need to rethink that and allow teachers the time to learn and grow together and to reward a career path where a teacher leader is staying in the classroom, compensated in a way that recognizes that extra work, but also allows them to stay in the classroom as well. So how do we rethink the use of time in addition to how we use resources?
Romy?
I just want to double down on what Margaret said. I mean, I think that this comes down to being able to have the right compensation schemes that allow teachers to feel like they can grow in their roles. In many schools and districts, we've seen constructs like master teacher, which allows teachers to take on more peer leadership roles and feel like they can be a mentor and earn more without having to step into the administrator role. But I really think that, not to jump ahead, Cheryl, like some of the acceleration happening right now as a result of AI can be really helpful in bringing kind of a new tool to teachers in terms of taking some of the grind out of the role. And we have Gallup research that shows that teachers save, on average, I believe it's about 6 hours a week when they are sort of using AI fluently. That is the equivalent of about 6 weeks a year. So you can imagine, as a veteran teacher, someone who's trying to sort of find ways after perfecting their craft to free up some time to reinvest that time in their school in new ways, in their families, and the things that matter to them. Like, I just think we're sort of arriving at a new frontier of what's possible, and we need to support that.
Yeah.
One quick add to that, it's so in addition to the freeing up of time so adults can work together and so forth, again, this technology obviously is allowing teachers to be more precise and more personalized in serving students, and how we align those efficiencies with that quality of delivery. I mean, teachers are going to be able to be much more sophisticated in how they deploy learning across a very wide spectrum of student needs.
I mean, I think, and again, just to maybe get your thoughts, both of y'all's thoughts on this a little bit more, if you have them, is, we've got the teacher cohort, which is this amazing group of individuals. And when there was discussion around this issue of AI as a tool and how it's being used, it was wide variance in sort of, their understanding of it, use of it, direction from either the school or the district, and how to use it, whether they can use it, all of that. And so all of the things that, you were talking about, Romy, I think, I guess my question in here is, and maybe it's more for you, Romy, based on some of the research that you all have done with Gallup, is what is it looking like in the classroom in terms of the availability of AI, the use of it, their understanding of it, and is there some, I don't know, what can we do, I guess?
Yeah. And as everybody knows, we're sort of like living into this moment all together. But what I would say, having been at a school yesterday in the South Bronx, Dream Charter School, and had an opportunity to talk to them, the thing that struck me the most was that AI for teachers doesn't mean AI for students. And we as a sector and as leaders in this sector need to be having a much more nuanced conversation about AI tools in education.
Yeah.
They have rolled out AI tools for their teacher workforce in the same way that I have access to AI tools in my job to help me in my administrative work. And many of the folks on this call probably have access to those same tools. They are running very targeted pilots, giving teachers exposure to how those tools can help them in their jobs. I also want to celebrate groups like Play Lab, who are bringing training and experiences to teachers to simply experiment with the possibility of AI. So right now we're in the sort of very early innings of what this all looks like, but I think it's important for us to bifurcate the conversation. In the same way that so many professionals in this country have access to AI tools to help them, support their writing, organize information, produce a report in a, half the amount of time. That's some of the targeted work I see happening with teachers. I think I'm also seeing some experimentation, which is exciting. And again, we have to differentiate this conversation between teachers and students as we move forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Margaret, did you have anything to add?
No, other than to say double amen to Romy, because I do think, to the extent that parents and families have concerns or anxieties or uncertainty around AI, we need to make sure that the adult piece of that is separated, because we can make life better and easier for teachers pretty darn quickly.
Absolutely. It feels like there may be some, need to understand where the unevenness is, I guess, in terms of access for teachers to these tools. I think what, this conversation and what you both have described throughout it is not a profession in retreat, but one at a bit of an inflection point. And the data suggests that the path forward is less about motivation and more about design, and about whether our systems are capable of supporting that design at scale. And so the question really is, how does that translate into practice, which is the next panel that we're going to get to. But before I turn that to my colleague, I just want to thank you both so much for your leadership on these and so many issues over the years. And this was a really fun conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl.
And now I would love to turn it over to my colleague, Christy Wolf, the director of our K-12 program here at BPC, to facilitate the next conversation. Christy.
Thank you, Cheryl. Really excited to dig in a little deeper into our conversation today. I'm really pleased to have Kara Orange-Jones from Teach Plus, the CEO of Teach Plus, with us. She's been a great partner. Her team has been a great partner with us as we've worked with teachers and with Gallup and this whole project of learning about how to address this design problem of the teacher workforce. And then Heather Pesky, the president of the National Council on Teacher Equality, has also been a great partner with us, served on the K-12 subcommittee for our Commission on the American Workforce, and here today to really get into the nuts and bolts on the policy side of things. And naming the teachers that were part of the cohort who were in the initial video that we saw at the top of the hour, go back and watch it if you missed it. We had 12 teachers that served as a cohort. A number of those teachers were fellows with Teach Plus, and also one of them is now the National Teacher of the Year, Leon Smith. So I just wanted to shout out Leon as part of this. These teachers were here with us for a week. We've been meeting with them. They came to our commission event. They were on the Hill and informed this Gallup work. And now one of them has been recognized in a really unique and special way. So I just wanted to make sure we took a moment for that. So diving into our discussion here, after Cheryl and Margaret and Romy kind of teeing up the big picture for us, especially that what we're talking about today is fundamentally a design challenge. And what does that design challenge, where it's being tackled, what does it look like in practice? We've surfaced the idea of staffing models and career pathways, but there could be other broader policies and supports that make teaching a sustainable profession over time. And we want to get into that. So the Gallup data suggests that when teachers take on roles connected to their work, their student outcomes improve, right? Which is what we want to see from all of this, is not just teachers thriving as workers, but also that their students are benefiting. So Heather and Kira, are schools actually designing for this today, and where is that happening, and what does it look like in practice? Would love to hear from you some examples of states or districts or schools that are really getting this right, and what roles are really being intently designed to maximize teacher impact while keeping them in the profession. Kira, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Thanks, Christy. Very excited to be here. At Teach Plus, we've been committed to supporting teachers to expand their leadership, impacting practice, policy, and public narrative for the past 15 years. And we are excited that this conversation has, conversation happening today, and certainly the conversation happening, I think, across this country, focused on an evolving teaching role has become so central. And if we think about sort of the root of this, what are we really talking about? We're talking about today's average school model being designed during the industrial era, right? To prepare students for factory work, prioritizing compliance and routine. And yet the modern workforce demands something very different, requires collaboration, problem solving, and the ability to work across diverse perspectives. So schools, should reflect that reality and should be designed to be collaborative, adaptive, and continuously improving. And by and large, while there are many pockets of excellence that we can point to at scale, and as a field, we haven't actually been good enough at learning at the pace of student needs, right? So if we are serious about meeting students' needs, education will have to become one of the fastest learning sectors over the next decade, no question. And in practice, what we're seeing at Teach Plus through our work working across 8 states and over 16 districts is really early strong results from models where teachers are teaming, being led by expert teacher leaders who anchor collaboration, high quality instructional materials, and job embedded coaching, right? And the question about, well, what would actually this take on the policy side at a very high level, and I'm sure Heather will speak to this more deeply, it takes full systems to align, right? We need funding, right, for differentiated teaching roles. We need evaluation systems that identify and develop high growth teachers. We need flexibility in staffing and school size, and also probably even schedules, so teams can respond to student needs in real time.
Thanks, Kira. Heather?
Thanks so much for inviting me to come. I love this topic. As a former teacher, I think about this a lot. And I guess, Christy, going back to the question you asked, this question about how do we design our systems differently? How do we reimagine roles so that teacher roles don't look like in the industrial time? One example that I wanted to provide is a specific example from Ector County Independent School District, which is located, if you imagine, it's Margaret's home state of Texas. Ector County is sort of central west in Texas, and it's a huge district. It's about 900 square miles, and it's really the main economic driver in Ector County is the oil and gas industry. And so in 2019, the district was really struggling to fill teacher roles. In fact, they had in 2019, 350 teacher vacancies district-wide. And so they had a new superintendent at that time. And what he was willing to do is take a risk to redesign and reimagine teacher roles. And so they started this pilot implementing what was called at the time a strategic staffing model in partnership with an organization called Opportunity Culture. And really the point of the model is to try to identify teachers who are highly effective, who are willing to work with other teams of teachers, like Kira described, in order to extend their reach and make greater impact on kids. And so they used the strategic staffing model at first in 10 schools. They piloted this model, and they worked this model over the course of 4 years. And in the course of those 4 years, using this model where teachers had varied roles and were extending their reach, they were actually able to reduce the number of vacant teaching positions to only 36. So from 350 to 36 in 4 years. That's a 90% reduction in teacher vacancies, because there was such enthusiasm for this redesigned role and for the opportunities it presented. And I also want to add that they did an analysis, that Texas Tech did an analysis of this model. And what they found is that students who were taught by teachers who were working under the direction of these multi-classroom leaders actually experienced stronger student achievement in both reading and also in math, with even larger gains for students who are English learners. So these models and these changes that we're talking about are certainly designed to help teachers thrive, But ultimately, the purpose is to ensure that students are thriving and that we see those results in student outcomes. And again, I would just add in Ector County Independent School District, they were very methodical in their approach, and they started small and then grew and scaled over time, which is one of the key components of ensuring that teachers are involved in the design and the implementation. So I just love that example of going from 350 vacancies to 36 in 4 years through a strategic staffing model that had huge impact on student learning and on teachers themselves.
Thanks, Heather. That's such a great example of reimagining the profession and taking on the design challenge that's there. What do you think is like the heart of strategic staffing? I mean, you all have sort of mentioned some key elements like a master teacher and some of the benefits in terms of the attractiveness of the model, higher pay. But if you had to explain to someone, on the street or in an elevator, or a little bit more than an elevator ride, but what are some of the key components of the new way of looking at it under that framework? Kara, it looked like you wanted to jump in.
Sure. I would say a few of the components you would see, although again, to Heather's point, I think there's so many exciting examples of innovation happening where maybe it plays out differently, but some of the things you'd see would look like a teacher leader that has partial teaching schedule and a partial instructional leadership schedule, right? As their responsibility. You'd see teacher leaders receiving additional compensation for their role and for their impact. And in some models, what you would see is teacher teams grouping students flexibly based on need, right? So this flexibility then allows the teams to spend more time working with students who need it most, following what the data actually tells them about what students need more support. And that could look like digging into complex text or reinforcing math concepts. That's where I would start for some tenants you would see.
Heather, anything you
I'll
want
jump
to add
in.
there? Yeah.
I think we always have to start by saying, what's the end goal for students, and backward map from there. So there are a variety of possible models in this reimagined thinking about teachers' roles or this redesign of systems. But we always have to start with the end goal for students. So is it about advancing literacy outcomes in the early grades? Is it about designing career pathways in high schools that better align with the job and economic demands of the community? So you start first with students. But really what we're setting out to do is disrupt these traditional approaches to teaching that were designed during an industrial, and in fact, most people say they're designed during an agrarian time. So really trying to disrupt those traditional teaching roles in favor of much more innovative solutions. So things like expanding class size and providing roles for everyone from master teachers who've demonstrated their effectiveness to people who are learning to teach and want to have more robust experiences in classrooms. Margaret talked about some of the aspects of flexibility that we need, like flexible scheduling. Also kind of making the profession more sustainable. Maybe you teach half the day with students and you work the other half the day with other adults, helping them to be more impactful. But ultimately, we want to see these redesigned roles lead to improved student outcomes, as well as increases in retention of really excellent teachers. But really, this means like tapping into more people, being more flexible. Romy talked about the importance of embracing AI as a means of improving teacher capacity. So all of these are part of the design, but ultimately really designing these new approaches with the end goal for kids in mind.
Great. That's super helpful to unpack a little bit more what it looks like on the ground to see these models in action. I think I heard it described once at the current rate of implementation of these models, it would take about 500 years to reach all the districts. So where do you see friction here? Like, what are the biggest barriers, whether it's policy, funding, contracts, mindset? to prevent this design from scaling more rapidly than 500 years?
Heather, I'll let you go. I'll follow you.
I think part of the problem is that we lack imagination. And so it's really easy to cling to the status quo. I mean, I've been kind of surprised, shocked almost, that we had a global pandemic and most people said we just want to go back to what we had before. And so NCTQ, we did a report about a year and a half ago called Reimagining Teaching Roles. And we looked at state policies because we wanted to ask this question, what are the barriers to being able to reimagine teacher roles? And how do we get rid of those barriers? And one of the most interesting findings is that there actually are not a lot of state policy barriers. And so I think if we need to talk about these roles more, we need to share the designs and the new models so that people have a better understanding and indeed a better vision of what it could look like if we did this differently. People often ask me if there are cost barriers. You can really do this in a cost neutral way, but for the fact that you might need a little bit of initial seed funding in order to begin to implement the models. But the model I described in Ector County, Texas, that model is cost neutral at this point and is not costing the district additional funds in order to implement. So I think sometimes it's a lack of our own imagination, which is why webinars like this are so important in sharing the importance of these models and sharing the possibility and indeed demonstrating that these models can be implemented, they can be implemented well, and they make a difference for students and also for teachers.
I would build on that, agree with everything Heather said. Lacking imagination and perhaps just change being hard, right? The sort of reluctance to sort of try something new. It's essentially hard to change, and especially possibly eliminate roles that have been historically in place for a very long time, right? This structure, which is anchored in a notion that teams of teachers who are led by expert teachers have the potential to focus on learning and improvement at the classroom level, does require a rethinking. To Heather's point, it doesn't necessarily require, and I think lots of our partners are proving that it doesn't require more resource necessarily, but it does require restructuring and re-resourcing existing models. But doing so could be very effective, I think, and affordable as well. I'd add just sort of finding time to the list as a potential barrier, right? And creating a clear purpose for its time, right? In the 8 states that we're working with across 16 different districts, what we've seen is that when, teachers are actually clear about how they're spending that time and what the purpose is, and also when their time is aligned to not only focusing on the teaming structure, but also having access to high quality instructional materials aligned with high quality professional learning, it is more likely to succeed. If we think too narrowly just about the sort of innovation of staffing, without these other components, we run the risk of not considering the fact that we often hear from teachers that while they like working in teams, they still find themselves creating lesson plans from scratch, discussing what they want to teach week to week, or maybe even reinventing their whole curriculum. So we know that when this innovation is integrated with all of the best practices we've learned about putting high quality materials into teachers' hands and then aligning their professional learning to that, it is more likely to lead to student success.
Yeah, so flipping this around, we're focusing on friction, but I think you all have named some things that lead to success, whether it's vision, time, an acknowledgement that there needs to be a holistic reform, including HQIM. Romy mentioned political leadership with Governor Sanders in Arkansas implementing the LEARNS Act there. Heather, anything specific that led to the success in Hector, or any other ingredients that make these reforms, give them that leaders take the initiative and that they stick around?
Yeah, I think there are probably 5 things quickly. Don't worry, I won't be too long. But the first is just really, I think it's 5. I'm counting in my head, but I think it's 5. The first is really strong leadership at the top, either the state chief, the state superintendent, or the district superintendent. Like those folks need to be committed because it is hard, especially in the beginning, to implement something new, and there may be some pushback. The second thing is really just this clear vision for how the model that you're going to employ, the new model, how it supports student learning. That has to be at the center of what you're doing. The third is really to start with a coalition of the willing. So you don't necessarily need to go and implement across the entire district at the start, or certainly not across a whole state, but start with some places that are really willing to try it, see the evidence for what you can do, and that will build a groundswell of interest and a coalition of that gets bigger and bigger. And then I think really making sure that there's a partner involved to help in the implementation of these models. There are folks out there who are good at this. This is what they do. And it's really helpful to have them alongside you since they've learned the lessons before. And then the last thing, I think number 5 is, if I'm counting correctly, is to make sure that you're tracking the data. Not only things like teacher satisfaction and teacher retention, but of course, student outcomes and participation and cost. So really, those are some of the components that we think about in order to implement these models and to do so successfully.
Build just on two, again, agree with everything Heather said. 2 things to, I think, what we've seen in our pilot work, what's come to the surface. To the point about leadership, it's not just sort of like aligned leadership, but specifically a clear instructional vision, right? That centers teaming and HQIM to function as a coherent strategy. Right? In those cases, we are seeing the most accelerated progress. And I think Heather spoke to this one too, but just this notion that roles have to be clarified, right? So teacher leaders are driving instructional change while in some ways still holding on to their classroom responsibilities. They need clearly defined roles. They need to be supported so they can actually thrive as they take on expanded leadership. Okay, that's her list.
Great. Well, what we're starting to migrate to is something broader than just strategic staffing, the bedrock perhaps of reimagining the workforce. But we should also talk about the conditions that make the profession sustainable over time. So we've talked about role design, strategic staffing. What are some of the areas that we should touch on? I think one that sits just outside of the traditional education conversation, but is central to this modern workforce is paid family leave. This kind of narrowing the scope of some of the things that Margaret mentioned in terms of pay and benefits. But we want to design a profession that reflects the realities of modern work and family life. So how important is paid family leave to that conversation for teachers? And Heather, I know you've recently looked into this, so I'm going to pitch it to you first.
Okay. I think this goes back to what Margaret and Romy were saying about really needing to think about the system. And so we completed this analysis we looked at every single state to see what is their policy when it comes to paid family leave. And we know that paid family leave is a really important issue for teachers. 1 in 3 teachers report access to paid parental leave, and that's 14 points lower than other workers. And as Margaret said, there's really national support for this. Paid parental leave is a popular issue across the political spectrum. 80% of respondents in a national survey say that they favor such a policy. But the bad news is that despite the clear evidence and the really well-documented benefits of paid parental leave for families, we know that 2/3 of states, or 35 states, still offer no guaranteed paid parental leave for teachers beyond just the accumulated sick days that they have. Now, I have 2 children and I was a teacher. It is a really hard thing to ask teachers to hoard their sick days or try to time their pregnancies in the summer. It's just kind of an absurd notion. And we're asking teachers to choose between having their own families and supporting their students and being classroom teachers. So really, we're advocating for the importance of states to provide paid parental leave for teachers, up to 12 weeks of paid parental leave to support districts in paying the cost of substitute teachers when teachers are on paid family leave. And really to provide that paid family leave, not just for the parent who gives birth, but also for the parent who's supporting the family at home. And again, there's tons of evidence that this is helpful to families, it's helpful to children, there are long-term benefits, and ultimately it's helpful to our communities. But right now, we aren't doing enough to support teachers in getting access to paid family leave. We had a quote from one teacher who said, quote, "Before my state offered paid leave, I hoarded sick days for years, working through sickness and exhaustion, just so that I could one day afford to become a mother. I even went to work the day my water broke, teaching until my prep period before heading to the hospital." So we really need to take the profession to a place where, particularly a profession that's dominated 80% by women, we need to provide access to this benefit, both to support them as people, but also so that they'll come back and flourish as teachers in support of their own students.
Kara, thoughts on whether this is a real important issue, especially with the teachers that are part of your organization?
Absolutely. We hear firsthand from our teachers all the time that they really want this. I'll just echo everything that Heather said. You know, a teacher in California recently, a fellow of ours, wrote a op-ed that said, hey, California, which is where she lives, has some of the best parental leave laws in the country, but asked, why don't they apply to teachers? Right. Another teacher recently told her story that she's trying to find the right time to plan with her husband to have a baby so that she can try to accumulate enough sick days so that she doesn't actually have to take more time off work, or how she might make disability insurance work. Right. So teachers do what they have to do. They are innovative, they are creative, they try to figure out ways to figure out. But to Heather's point, they certainly shouldn't have to. And just an acknowledgement, I thought NCTQ's data on this was incredibly compelling. You know, the fact that 1/3 of states require districts to offer some sort of paid family leave, which means 2/3 don't. This just feels like a really incredibly important issue to tackle. I'm grateful we're talking about it.
One other quick thing I would add is that, and thank you, Kara, for the nice shout out. I appreciate it. One other thing I would add is that we looked at the cost of paid parental leave in each state. So if you go to our website, nctq.org, and look at our paid parental leave calculator, what we found is that in some states, it would not cost very much to provide teachers with access to paid parental leave. In fact, in some states, we estimate that for each taxpayer, it would cost the cost of a pack of gum or a cup of coffee each year per taxpayer to be able to provide teachers with access to paid parental leave. So it's high time that we really support teachers in gaining access to this benefit that many of us in other professions have enjoyed for a long time.
Well, if you take a step back from everything that we've discussed, which we've covered a lot of ground in the 25 minutes that we've been together so far, role design, compensation, we've touched on flexibility, paid family leave. What do you think is the most important shift in how we design the teaching profession that would change its long-term sustainability? Among what we've discussed, and hopefully we've covered one of them, but if you want to bring something else into the conversation, feel free.
I can start. I guess I would just say the other thing is to underscore, and Margaret talked about this at the beginning of the hour, is really the importance of districts and states using compensation as a resource that drives the changes that we want to see. And right now, we're not doing enough to differentiate. First of all, we need to pay teachers more. And then second, we need to differentiate compensation by student need and by the needs of the district. And sometimes people ask me about these models and they say, well, it sounds very expensive. Right now, we're giving teachers subsidies for master's degrees that have no alignment with the research on improving outcomes for kids. So that's kind of a pot of money right now that is not being well used. I'd say we really need to target our dollars and our resources where they're needed in terms of improving student outcomes and ensuring that we build models that are not like the Model T, but rather electric cars in the teaching profession. So really ensuring that we're meeting the needs of students of today and certainly meeting the conditions and the interests of teachers of today as well.
Agreed. I would add not just differentiated compensation, but also just compensation generally. Like teachers should be able to support their families, and they should be able to do so without waiting until they're 15 years into their profession to be able to do that. I'd also add induction, mentoring, development, and support to the list as integral. Essentially, how teachers enter the profession and how they're developed with an eye towards their longevity and success in the classroom feels like integral and part of this conversation.
Well, thank you both so much for being a part of this conversation today. As Stephanie mentioned at the top of the hour with the Gallup presentation of findings, we really want to work together in a bipartisan way to make the education profession sustainable. And what we've heard today is not a narrative of decline, but a clear articulation of what the profession and the broader workforce requires to endure and to strengthen. The data doesn't show a workforce that's walking away. It shows a workforce adapting to systems that have not kept pace. It needs to be a 21st century model. And within that adaptation is a blueprint that we've been talking about today. And the challenge for us is not simply to understand that blueprint, but to build the systems and the policy frameworks that make it possible. And we've seen through our work here at BPC with the Commission on the American Workforce that there is a path forward with bipartisan consensus, and one that calls for a more coherent, connected systems that align talent, opportunity, and support. We have shown in other moments of national urgency that when the stakes are clear, we can act with focus and coordination. But the question is now is whether we're prepared to bring that same level of commitment to investing in people. This is not a work for one sector alone. It requires alignment across policy, practice, philanthropy, and industry. And this opportunity is before us, not simply to respond, but to design a system that both reflects the demands of our time and the talent of the people within it. So thank you all. Thanks to all our speakers, and thank you for joining us.